Okay, so we're going to go start delving into statistical tests. First, we'll cover them generally. Then we'll start delving into the different types of tests more specifically. So this video will just cover the generals and then delve into t-tests specifically. Other videos will come to delve into the other types of tests. So there are two main types of tests. You have tests of mean differences, how different groups or time points look different on continuous variables. So examples of that are t-tests and ANOVAs, and then tests of relationship, how continuous variables increase or decrease with each other. And that would be, examples would be correlations or regressions. So when we're reading statistics in an article, a lot of times we'll see some statistics that look like this. There are two things listed here. One is the test statistic, the other is the p-value. Remember we talked about p-values. They tell us if it is likely if there is a relationship or not. The test statistic interpretation depends on which test you're using, but each test has their own test statistic to help us understand what happened with our data. And then the p-value tells us if that test statistic is significant or not. So let's start with t-tests. So in t-tests, they compare the means of two groups on a particular variable, or it can be comparing two time points. But the important part is there are only ever two groups with t-tests. No more, no less. If you're using t-tests to compare two different time points, there can only be two time points that you're comparing. No more, no less. You're comparing them on continuous variables. So the independent variable is categorical, nominal with two levels, and the dependent variable is continuous or null interval ratio. So let's give an example of when we would use a t-test. You want to find out how men and women are different on depression levels. So let's break that down. So we have men and women, so that's categorical or nominal. And we're wanting to see how they're different on depression levels. So what we would do is we would go and get the mean depression level for men and then the mean depression level for women, and we would compare them and see if they are the same or different. So the test statistic that is used for t-tests is the t statistic, or the t-value. The higher the t-value, the greater the differences between the two groups. If t is statistically significant, meaning if the p-value is less than 0.05, we reject the null hypothesis. And in tests of mean differences, the null hypothesis is that there is no difference between the groups. Okay, so let's do an example. So there are two time points, pre-class, post-class, so, or in other words, pre-test, post-test. And these were the means for the two time points. And here's the t-value. And this little asterisk tells us that p was less than 0.05. Therefore, these two means are statistically different than each other. So here's an unpaired t-test. So we have males and females, And then we have these various continuous variables: age, credits, GPA, hours worked. And here are the means. Now, if you look at this, these asterisks indicate which ones are significant and at which level. So these hours worked and age were statistically different from each other in their means. And the p-value is less than 0.001. So that means that males and females were statistically different on their age levels, and they were also statistically different on their hours that they worked. However, the credits they took and their GPA were not statistically different from each other on the means. Now, something to let's go back. So remember that the larger the t-value is, the larger the difference. So notice when these means were different, the t-value was much larger than when these means were not statistically different from each other. So that's it.